At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Tammy, welcome to the show.
So happy to be here, Dr. Doug.
Well, it's great to have you on the show. This is going to be fascinating. Of course, we've had some conversation before we started this, so that's been fascinating, and I'm looking forward to this. What I'd love for you to do is share with the audience who you are and what is your journey that brought you to this point of doing what you're doing.
Okay. So I'm Tammy Cox. I help women save their marriage from divorce, whether or not their husbands are on board, by healing the wounds caused by childhood trauma. And my story is I grew up in a home with tons of trauma. I grew up with, my dad was, abusive, controlling. A lot of the religious trauma, how I told you I come from a very religious background, but it was religion with tons of control. Like, you can't do this, put us in a bubble, And fast forward, when I was 11, my father ended up dying of AIDS. And I all of a sudden was privy to a whole mysterious side I had no idea about. So basically, I spent my teen years very, very angry, very, very, I was filled with rage, really, with unforgiveness, like you name it. So by the time I was 19, I was on a downward spiral, and it was one of the first times I was severely depressed and suicidal. And I made a decision at 19, and then again, when I had another severe depression when I was 29-ish, I made a decision that I was either going to take my life or I was going to heal. And so when I was 19 was the start of my journey, but then I ended up going like this. You know how we go on our journey, up, down, up, down, up, down. Well, when I became a wife and when I became a mom, all my triggers started going off. All that stuff that I thought was way in the past, that was in my childhood, is started rising up within me. And so I didn't know what to do with myself. I went through all the books. I went through religion, prayer, therapy, like you name it, retreats. I did it. And nothing worked until I really started doing the trauma work. And that was when I started digging into my trauma. And once I did that, I completely transformed. Oh, by the way, my marriage was terrible, like terrible. So once I healed and transformed, my marriage transformed, my family unit transformed. And that's when I was like, oh, this is it. This is what I've been searching for. And so obviously I want to help myself. So I help women who are in the same position that I was in, where all their traumas are coming up. They have no idea what's going on. They've tried all the things and nothing has worked. And they think it's their husband, but it's not. It's them. It's him too, but it's them. And so that's who I serve, and that's what I love to do.
Well, and it's fascinating as you talk about different causes for those limiting beliefs, and how do they affect now? And we're going to talk about women because that's your main focus, but obviously this is totally relevant to men too. It's just that they don't have quite the right brain to get in and really do the work as hard as women do. But how do you find? Well, first of all, I want to go back, and this is a very delicate subject, is the suicide.
Yeah.
But I would like for you to share with the audience what was it that allowed you to move away from that process and move into a different mindset and a different life. I just lost a nephew to suicide, and it's so difficult to understand. And here in Utah, where I'm at, huge suicide rate. And it's like, how do we help these young people, or 20-year-olds or whatever you want to call them? How do we help them to recognize if they're in that depressed type of state? How can they break away from that rather than just thinking that everything is hopeless?
Mm. Well, they first have to understand that you are not just this. You are not just a body. One day you're going to shed this body and you will never not be you, right? So you have to give them this understanding. And I believe that probably that's happening in Utah because it's so religious. And we're moving away from religion because religion has added a bunch of shame. Right? That's what I grew up with, so much shame. You're not this thing. Look at this list of rules. You're not adding up to this list of rules. What are you doing? And so it's like these shame tapes that are going off in our head. When you talk about the limiting beliefs, it's all the shame that's like, you're not this, right? And so we got to teach, like, religion is missing some major, major holes within our divinity as human beings. We are not just a body. And if we see ourselves as just a body, then it's like, oh, I better take myself out of this. Like one thing that I really work on with my clients is their thought patterns. And the Bible talks about this. In fact, I use a lot of the Bible. I'm in no way anti-religion. I just think religion needs to open up to the fuller part of what it could be, which is really dealing with that spiritual aspect of us. So for me to go to that place where I'm like, no, I'm going to heal myself, I had to know that I wasn't just this meat suit. I had to know that I was spirit as well. And so in changing the way I thought, I changed myself entirely. So if you understand how your thoughts work, your thoughts are creating your whole life experience, because it goes identity creates the beliefs, beliefs create the thoughts, thoughts create the emotions, and the emotions create the circumstances of our life. So we got to go back to the identity. Who are you? Who are you? And if all you can give me is this name of your meat suit, we're missing a huge component of who and what you are. So,
Well, and yeah, and where you have a religious background, I have a religious background in Christianity, and as I told you earlier, I also love Buddhism and have really studied that a bit. But what I find, and I think you've hit it on the spot, is so many people do not understand that there's a divinity within us, and as you say, if all we're doing is focusing on our body, that's a nightmare. Whereas if we understand, I think one of the things that has fascinated me so much as I've looked at this whole process is that, when Christ said, I am that I am, and as I've looked at a lot of the scriptures and so forth, and I'm sure as you do, what fascinates me is that somehow that has all come around to, you need to do this, you need to do that, as you were saying, and then that guilt, that shame, all comes on us rather than the focus on becoming.
Yeah.
And becoming complete and who we
and knowing
can.
thyself, right?
Knowing thyself and becoming complete. That scripture that says, be ye therefore perfect, doesn't mean perfect. It means complete. And what does that mean? In my mind, it means that we start to understand how we've been so affected by DNA history, memory, by childhood, by religion, by all of those things, and being able to understand that what's important is for us to become.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm reminded of, like, what Jesus spoke about more than anything else was the kingdom of heaven. And if you ask most people who follow any religion that is based in the Bible, they can't even tell you what the kingdom of heaven is. And it is the most important part of who and what we are. It's like, it is us. It is that heavenly state that we can tap into at any point in time, right? But if we're so caught up in that ego side to our mind. It's about knowing thyself, meaning knowing the parts that are really you and the pretended you, which is the ego, which is all those beliefs that are constantly going zoo, 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 zoo in my mind, right? And this takes me to one thing I do for my clients that I think changes them more than anything else. It's identifying the major limiting beliefs. We call them commands, life commands in my line of work, but it's identifying the life commands that are really running the show. And my two were, I'm unlovable and I'm not important. And once I found them, I saw all the different places in my life that I made those true for myself.
Well, and
They were creating all of it.
let's talk about that for a minute because, you're unlovable, that type of thing. What did you see happening in your life that were the results of that, which you didn't realize until, you figured it out? What experiences were you having in your marriage and all of those type of things that when you finally look back, you realize it had to do with those limiting beliefs of I'm not lovable?
Yeah, I remember telling my husband we're not good. Sometimes I still do this, by the way, but I'll be like, do you even love me? Like, just he hates when I do it, but I'll still do it from time to time. But I did it all the time when we were in a really unhealed place, and he couldn't stand it. But I really didn't feel like he loved me. And what I didn't realize was I was not letting him love me because I did not believe I was lovable. When you tell someone who believes so strongly that they are unlovable, it just bounces right off. In fact, it made me not trust people that told me that they loved me. So it wasn't until I went back. So we do this process to neutralize the trauma, and we basically go back to the traumatic events, and we do it in the first 5 years because that's where your entire personality was developed. So we go back to the earliest memories. And so for me, these commands came up in every one of my traumatic events. And just know that a traumatic event doesn't have to be an accident. It doesn't have to be this huge thing. It could be something so simple. But in every traumatic event, I had both those commands that were always highlighted. And so what happens is when we're in this high state of negative emotion, we create this belief and it gets stamped onto our subconscious mind, and it basically stays there forevermore. So we need to figure out those ones that are very specific to us in order to override them with the truth. So for me, it was when, like, my dad would spank us, but they were very abusive rituals that he would use. And so those were major traumas for me. But then I had small ones. Like I had this one around my own safety, and it was just basically my dad getting an IV. And my little tiny mind came up with this belief that I'm not safe or my future's not safe just from that event. It wasn't anything significant. And we have those with everything. We have them around money. We have beliefs around males, females. So for me, my dad being abusive, my commands around men were men are scary and men hurt me. Could you imagine the kind of men I attracted with those beliefs?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's so important for us to find those beliefs, because then we could say, okay, this is not something I want to keep true for myself.
Well, and it's so interesting as you talk about those beliefs, and if you get into meditation and quantum physics and all of that type of thing, the reality is that those limiting beliefs shed forth a frequency that literally, and I try to explain to people, when you have a magnet where boom, they come together, what happens is that we literally attract the very thing that we're trying to avoid because we are still living within that frequency.
Yep. Yep, we are. And that's how fear works. That's why people who are fearful, they're constantly attracting fear to them. People who are victims, constantly attracting victim circumstances. Haven't you noticed? They got a new victim story for you every day. And so yeah, it's like we are everything that we attract in our life, just like our meeting today, Dr. Doug, all of it is frequency. We're attracting everything. So instead of judging it when you attract someone into your life, like with ladies, I also have friends who are former coaches, and I'd love one place I'd really love to go next is with attracting your perfect mate, because it's the same system I work on now. And so they'll call me and I'll be like, when you meet someone and they have these qualities, don't judge it. All you need to say is, okay, I'm seeing that I'm still attracting this pattern. Let me go through and really work on my beliefs around who men are, who I am, what life is, like the beliefs that I'm really holding, because they're always going to be reflected back to you in your experience. So don't judge it. Just look at it. Take a little investigation, a microscope, and just start like really zooming in and being like, okay, what is going on in my consciousness that I'm attracting this?
Well, and it's interesting because you talk about the trauma that you went through,
Yeah.
and there's a huge percentage of individuals that go through that type of trauma. So we cannot minimize that at all. But what I find really fascinating is, and you brought it up, that you said, well, there were these little things. So it also has to do with perception. And as children, I think there's there's probably people that are listening and said, hey, I had a great childhood. I had a wonderful childhood. So what's the deal? And yet we have to understand that as children, we have a perception that is not necessarily reality. So a parent can say something to us, and that perception is saying, oh, he's saying I'm not good enough, when in fact, that's not what they meant, but that's what you got.
Yeah. And then there's epigenetics too, Doug.
Oh yeah, and that's what gets scary. I think about that a lot because I think about, free will, agency, all of that. People talk about that, but the reality is how much do we have when we have those DNA memories from past generations that are still within us that from time to time, because of epigenetics, will come up, and it won't even be our memory. It will be an ancestor's memory, and yet we're experiencing it.
I tested this one. So I had a father that was really scary, right? My daughter doesn't. My mom had a father that was very scary. My second daughter, I only tested this in one of my children, but she has the same. Her dad is docile, sweet, mellow, like nothing like my dad, right? But she has the same beliefs about men, which I work on with her, which is men hurt me and men are scary. And so because I really wanted to know, not all my daughters have that. I have three daughters. They don't all have the same beliefs, but they are pulling from our lineage. But the beautiful part about epigenetics, if you've really done your research, we can turn off all the markers with our healing. When we go in, we healed generations back as far as generations forward. So it's a very powerful thing. It's the one thing I say, it's the greatest gift you can give this world is to heal yourself, because you will heal your lineage.
And I don't know that people understand that. I've got I think a great story about that. But I
Ooh.
come from a family of six children,
Uh-huh.
right? Five boys and then one girl. My dad literally growing up was had a belt taken to him often by his father.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I know that probably went on for generations in the past. And I watched, now that I'm adult and I look back, my dad and my mom never spanked us. Now, here you have five boys that are going to drive you crazy. They never spanked us at all. And because of that, in my family now, in my extended family with my brothers and my sister, guess what? No one gets spanked. There's not that physical abuse anymore. And so I think what you said is so important, that literally we can change the future generations just by consciously realizing, like my dad did, that I'm going to change this pattern. And by doing that, now it's going to be inherited by future generations, that's not going to happen anymore.
Yeah. So beautiful, right?
So what do you do with women who are, struggling? Uh, how do you go back and help them to discover that early childhood or even that epigenetic memory?
Well, first of all, we identify the emotion. So we have all these trapped emotions in our body, right? The good ones we want to keep there. That's the stuff we want to keep. But there's some stuff in you we need to get rid of. So our job is to really pull out the negative emotions that are trapped in there. And so we'll just I'll start by asking them questions. So I'll use the example of the husband because he's like the reason he is the closest mirror, the strongest mirror to her, where it's like, right? So what's going on in your marriage? How are you feeling from him? So if she doesn't feel loved by him, I'll say, okay, tap into that emotion, right? Feel it fully in your body. It's always trapped somewhere. And I'll say, first impression, where's that located in your body? Her eyes are closed. She feels it. She puts her hands on it. What color is it? Because the two languages we first learn when we come into this world is emotion and color. And so much of our stuff we can identify that way. So then I'll say, pull up, because I very much use the subconscious, right? So I say, pull up the first image of the time you felt this emotion. And sometimes if she's not because most of us were not in tune with our subconscious at all, but it's always the first voice. You're almost always going to try and talk yourself out of it. You're almost always going to argue with it, but it will be the first thing that pops up. So then we go through that event. We basically neutralize the event. So we go through the event over and over again until there's no more emotion left. And sometimes I'll see them take a deep breath in. They'll take like a deep sigh or a deep breath, and then you kind of just see it pass out of the body.
Well, and you're using a process that is similar to NLP,
Yeah.
neurolinguistic programming. Is that basically
Some
what you're doing?
forms, some forms of
Form.
NLP, because it's not in all forms. There's hints of it in EMDR. It's kind of a similar process. There's some in NLP, but there's many different processes that kind of do a similar thing.
Yes, yes, and absolutely. And I think the key is to be able to go in and help them to, as you say, take the influence of it off or reframe it in a way that they look at it from an entirely different perspective. But how do you help them to literally remove it? Or is it that, and then you talked about ego, you talked about consciousness. How is it that people can literally either let it go or at least minimize it enough and be aware enough that when that starts to creep up again and they start to see behavior reflecting that again, how do they get to the point where that's not happening anymore?
They have to be so sick of the pain. I'll be honest with you. Some people they haven't experienced enough pain where they're just like, I'm not going to torture myself anymore. Like every time you go back to an event, you never remember it the same. You never remember it the same. Why? Because it's not a reality. It's something you created in your mind. That's why two people can go to an event and it's like, no, this happened. No, this happened. No, this happened. No, this. They all have different accounts because of, like you said earlier, it is their perception. It's through the eyes of their beliefs that they're perceiving the event. So once you change the beliefs, you can go back to an event. So I like to go back to my events and I like to remember them in a different way. Like you said, in a positive way. I don't want to demonize my dad. My dad did the best he could. He was just living his programming, right? I don't want to demonize myself. I don't want to demonize someone else. I don't want to demonize life. So for me, I create the story that I want to create. That's what I do. I go back and I create the story I want to create. And I basically set fire to the one that I distortingly created as a little tiny girl who, right, just had a different set of beliefs. I'm not that person anymore. So I create from the standpoint of what I want to experience.
Well, and so you talked about your own marriage and
Yeah.
the fact that it was not good.
There's not.
And you say that you really focus on helping women to improve those marriages with or without the help of
Yeah.
their husband. So what was your experience and how did you see a change take place? Because a marriage is two people, it's not just one. But how did you get to the point where, because of what you did and what you were working on, that you started to see a change in that relationship
I
and in your
started to,
husband?
yeah, I started to practice a different version of him. I started to practice the version of him that I wanted, and he transformed. And it started with one little practice. I just started journaling. What are the things I like about him? And when it first started, it was a very short list because I hadn't been practicing that, right? It was a very
Right.
short list. But that list started to grow when it became my daily practice. It started to get more detailed, and then it started to bring in emotion. And when emotion starts, you embody the emotion. I started to practice the version of him that I met and fell in love with. And I practiced it and practiced it and practiced it until I saw it. So, when Jesus talks about you're not going to be able to see something until you perceive something, right? It's been muddled with all the different translations, but basically he was
Right.
saying, you don't pray with this energy of like, I know I don't deserve this thing, but please, God, please give me this thing. That is not prayer. Prayer is saying, thank you for that thing I already have. Thank you. I already have it. It's mine. Thank you. Thank you. It is the embodiment. It's the knowing. It goes far beyond even belief. It's knowing it's yours. You know what I'm saying? And so
Yeah.
I knew it was mine. When I started to understand how the mind worked, when I started to understand my own power, I then said, I've been practicing him the shit way. Oops, sorry if I had to. I've been practicing him the negative way. Why don't I try the positive way and see what happens? And when I did it, when I saw the momentum grow on that, meaning my list started growing, and then he started getting nicer to me. And then he started doing things where I'm like, you did that in my dream, in my imagination for like a week. And then all of a sudden he finally does it. And I just started playing with it. I started playing with my reality in that sort of a way. And when I saw how powerful I was like, no one can convince me that I'm not powerful. No one can convince me that my mind can't create whatever it wants because that's what I did.
And what responsibility did your husband have?
Nothing. I looked at him and I said, babe, I realize I've had this all wrong. I thought you were my source to happiness. I thought you were the one that needed to make me happy, and I had it backwards. I realized that I needed to make me happy, that was my job, that it was my job to do within me. And you're just a bonus. So you're forever off the hook for making me happy. And when I did that, and sometimes I have to remind myself that I do that because I
Made
want
a
to make him
difference for him.
responsible. I'm not saying that some of those old patterns don't come up. What I am saying is that it was a realization, it was a switch within me that I had made him my source, and that was backwards. That I had to be the source of everything that I wanted. So I be who I want to be, and he gets to level up because of it. Like lucky him.
Well,
Blessed
and
lucky guy.
you talk about that, but as you know, especially with those limiting beliefs, and we were talking a little bit about that we keep attracting, that people keep attracting the same thing over and over again, particularly if they've been abused. What do you recommend? And have you ever dealt with women who are in, quote, a codependent, maybe abusive relationship? And do you
Yep.
see if someone is abusive because of whatever reason, their own epigenetics, do you find that that also is solved, or do you find sometimes you just have to say, all right, let's work on you, and at some point in time, you may need to walk away?
Exactly. Excuse me. A few things. When I take on a client, First of all, if I see a lot of abuse, I'm like, not playing this. Like she has to have a strong desire to change. Like, I'm not saying I won't take her, but she has to be like ready to go. That's number one. Number two is when one changes, both changes. If you think about the couple as a little universe, right? All your relationships, it's this there's so many non-physical aspects of that relationship. That's why I could look at my husband, come in that door, and I know what kind of mood he's in. I just feel him like that. There's a universe in every relationship. You are connected to that person. I have practiced this so long that I could look at someone in the same room and I know their personality because I can just read it, right? We're all energetic. So when my universe changes, his has to change. Now, it doesn't mean that he's not going to resist it. And by resisting, he might not even be able to stand. In fact, this is what we went through. When I went through my change, there were months where we were just not okay because he was wigging out. He's like, this is not our practice. This is what we do. We fight. Why aren't you arguing with me? He had no one to argue with, Doug. Who was he going to argue with? I wasn't even there. I wasn't the same person. Right? And so here I be. And he was wigging out because he's like, what does this mean for us? Is this the end? And I'm like, this is just who I be, right? And so when one person is the change, the other person has to, if they're going to be in their presence. Now, sometimes they just can't. They're just sometimes because a lot of the women that I attract are high supporters and their husband are high controllers. What we're working on is to balance those energies. Because my goal is to get them equal. If I can't get them equal, it's not healthy. And sometimes she wants to stay down here in victim, and which keeps him up here in, the controlling narcissistic behavior. And if she doesn't want to rise up, it ain't going to work. And I tell her that because I'm the controller in my relationship. So I'm the one who's going to hold the space for her. But I'm like, sweetheart, we got to get you up here. If we can't get you up here, sweetheart, this ain't going to be saved. So I am not attached to her saving the relationship because if she rises as much as she can and he falls off, like I'm not attached to the marriage being saved. I'm attached to her being healed. And in whatever that looks like in her life, I'm committed to that. So, but my goal is to get her taking up all her space because then he will come down to meet her. We just got to get that balance going. Does that answer your question?
Well, it does, and I think there has to be some point in time where he's also willing to do a little of that introspective work. Isn't that true, or
I mean,
not?
my husband, he will do it on his own. Don't get me wrong; he's come a long way and done it on his own.
Yes.
But I really think this is an energetics thing because the narcissist is that way because the narcissist, and I will put myself in that category because of my husband and I, he's more of the supporter and I'm more of the controller. When the narcissist is loved and that little kid in them is like, okay, come here. It's okay. I got you. When they have that support, the narcissistic tendencies, the controlling tendencies soften. So when she becomes that, basically the supporter and the controller or the narcissist, they've just got the opposite triggers from their trauma. And when her traumas are soothed, she can then be in a soft spot to soothe his when they're going off. So I really do believe that he will be massively impacted by her work. I saw it within my family, Doug. I did the work. I healed myself, but I saw my husband change and I saw all three of my daughters change because of my work. My girls didn't do it. He does it a little bit, he's into it now.
Right.
But he didn't do it initially. And I watched all of them change simply by me changing. So I think that it's the whole topic of, when one heals, we have this ripple effect on the entire world. Well, I really do believe that.
Yeah, and as you talk about that, I know one thing that comes to my mind, and you've talked about this, is forgiveness. And, it's one thing to say, all right, this is what he did, all right, and it's really difficult to forgive him. And yet, at the same time, as you're saying, but no, it's just pull up a mirror because it's really all about you. It's nothing about him, type of thing. How does an individual really learn and understand forgiveness? Because doesn't that make a big difference in a relationship?
Forgiveness is everything. It is the biggest topic we probably talk about in my program. It is letting go of the negative past is all forgiveness is. Some people think it's much bigger than that. It is just letting go of the negative past. It's so simple. If I bring in the version of my husband from all the years we've been together, and I bring it all and say, "Hey, this is all the things I stored up about you. You got a lot of, shit to heal."
Yeah, I know.
Um,
I was
you
waiting
know,
for that word again.
like these are all the things you have to atone for. Here you go. If I do that on a daily basis, how am I supposed to have that dreamy, amazing relationship that I want? Like, no. And would I want him to do that to me? No. It's like unforgiveness keeps us in the toxic past. All the toxic, all the dirt, all the crap in the past, you're bringing now into the future because you refuse to forgive. Forgiveness is a gift to us. It is such a gift. And you will know that like people, the most bitter people, they just refuse to forgive and they are just stuck as victims. It keeps you a victim. So yeah, like the way that I, healed my marriage was by taking absolute 100% responsibility.
How do
I,
you forgive yourself?
that's the key. You just make the choice to do it.
Okay, and you just learn to forgive yourself.
You just do it. It's like you don't try, you don't say, you just freaking do it. You say, I'm forgiving because I know it's for my best interest and for the best interests of the world. And I also know that unforgiveness is not serving me in any way, shape, or form. You have to get to that place to know that unforgiveness is not serving you.
Well, and how do people? I mean, I see this a lot where they struggle in their lives because they really can't forgive themselves.
They
And
can't.
it's amazing.
Why?
I don't know, and maybe it has to do with they've been, as you say, you were brought up in a very religious home, as was I, and yet sometimes that religion of you need to do this, you need to do that, gets to the point where that guilt and shame becomes so strong that it's very difficult for them to forgive themselves.
It was very difficult for me. I'm not
Was
gonna
it?
lie. Yeah, because I believed that I was a horrible person. I hated myself.
How
So
did
yeah, it
how
was,
how did you do it?
I made a decision. I just decided. So when you make a decision, unforgiveness is like this. Some people be like, well, I thought I forgave. It's like, but every time that a negative memory comes up, what are you doing with the thought? Are you grabbing a hold of it? Are you taking it captive and saying, yeah, I'm not believing this shit anymore. Sorry, that's the third bomb I throw on you. Obviously, I have a problem. But you grab a hold of the memory because we think in pictures, right? Our subconscious mind thinks in pictures. It experiences in pictures. It creates through pictures. So the picture comes up. Oh, remember that time you did that? You grab a hold of it. You say, no, I forgave that. I choose to forgive myself. And you picture it in a trash can, picture throwing it in a toilet. You just literally pick it up and you throw it away and you say, nope. You have to decide. Everything starts with a decision.
Well, and you have been so transparent about your own life, which I think is amazing. That's difficult sometimes. Any other quick stories about that come to your mind that you have permission to talk about that where you have seen someone transition from potentially a divorce to a very happy relationship?
Yes, I've seen lots. Um, yeah, I've seen lots. I've seen people who've, gone through infidelity who just could not. get past the infidelity. And then, 3, 5 years later, they're the happiest that they ever been, because that infidelity caused them to go back and really look at their, you know what? I have a really good story.
Okay, tell
Um,
it.
a beautiful woman, like she had a really long relationship, and he struggled with substance abuse, but she just held tight to him, like she did not want to let go. And they went through, I believe it was like 20 years of a relationship, just holding on to this belief. And then they finally get married, and hit some real bad turbulence. And they didn't have kids. They were a little bit older. And I started working with her. Their relationship transformed so fast. And then through our work together, she had realized that she had been so scared of having kids. She got pregnant right away. We had one session. She got pregnant, like I swear, within a week of that
Oh my
session.
goodness.
And they now have a new baby. They are so happy. Like they are like, she's just an all-star because she did all of her homework. Just so beautiful. But I have lots of those stories. I have lots of those stories.
And it can be done. And I think that's the key message for the audience is that if you're willing to do it and you're not in one of those situations where the other person is never going to change, then you literally can heal that relationship.
Yeah. Oh, I believe that anything's possible. Anything's possible.
So as we come to a close, because this has gone by so fast, what would be a message that you'd like to share with the audience?
Don't ever settle for who you are now. Always reach for that next level of yourself, because there's no limit to who you can be and what you can have. And I think that people have just been living within their limitations, and they don't see the potential. You have the potential to grab a hold of whatever it is. No relationship is lost. No relationship is like trash. I believe that it is possible for you to heal any relationship, even if that relationship does not look the same moving forward. Doesn't mean you guys stay together, but it means you have the ability to move forward and create that relationship that is what you really truly want.
Oh, thank you. And the key is you heal yourself. So if you have to move away from that relationship, now you're going to attract a different relationship. Is that true?
Yeah. And you're going to move away with love, though. You're going to send them away with love.
Yes, because you're right. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people talk about, oh, what a bad relate, and they go on and on and on about that partner, or that ex-husband or ex-wife, and they've never really let it go.
Yeah.
And so they keep attracting the same thing.
Yep. Yeah.
I've had
terrible relationships, but now I see them through a different perspective. I think all my trauma has served me so well. Like I would never regret any of it. It has been the greatest gift to my life.
Well, and I think you've hit on the key is as you look back at all of those quote failed relationships, if you approach it from the standpoint of what did I learn? And what did I learn about myself? And what did I learn about my choices and so forth? As you look at that, all of a sudden it becomes a learning, and you don't have that upsetness and that anger that so often people experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do people find you? Tammy, how do people find you?
I mean, I'm on all the platforms, Doug. I'm on, I'd say Instagram and Facebook are probably my biggest communities. But I could also give you a link to, I have a little mini course that's on my link tree, which is usually my free gift I give at a podcast. It's basically a mini course, how to heal your marriage. It's not very long, so people like that it's nice and short. But it will also give you the ability to reach out to me if you find yourself in a relationship where you don't know if you want to heal it, you don't know if you want to leave. I say at least give it a conversation with me before you call it quits, because remember, you're taking yourself wherever you go. So
Okay, and what's the link? What is that link?
I will give it to you. I don't know it. I don't know it by heart, Dr. Doug.
Oh, okay. If you can email that to me, I'll put that in
Okay.
the description.
Okay,
And I
good.
know you have your reclaimyourmarriage.com, but
That's
that's
No,
not the link.
it would be on that link, I think. I am not a techie girl. I am so tech dummy that I think it's on there.
Okay, now that's a limiting belief. You got to
is
work
a
on
limiting
that.
You found it. You found one of my core limiting beliefs. Yep.
Tammy,
Yeah.
thanks so much. This has been great. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate your transparency, because when people hear that, all of a sudden it allows them to realize, you know what? If she can do it, I can do it.
Yeah. It releases the shame too, Doug. Shame is like all the secrets. That's what I
Yeah.
learned in my family. It was all the secrets. I didn't know my dad had AIDS. It was one of those secrets we don't tell. And secrets keep us in the dark, and they keep us in shame. And so I just let it all hang out. And I think that if everyone got to be more in that place where they just refuse to see themselves as, shameful, it's like, embrace all of you, embrace every single aspect of who you are and what you've lived, because that is beautiful. That's what you came here to do. You didn't come here to get it all right and, walk in a straight line and do everything that, you're supposed to do. You came here to expand and grow and become more and make a lot of mistakes.
Amen. Well, Tammy, thanks so much. This has been great.
It's been
And
great
folks,
chatting.
yes, folks, thanks for listening. Hope you really enjoyed this. We look forward to having you join us again soon. This is Dr. Doug saying namaste.